The millionaire brought his maid to his ex-fiancée's wedding. What she did stunned the crowd. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Alexander Whitmore stands alone in the quiet of his penthouse as evening light fades over the city skyline, the kind of view people drive miles just to glimpse, yet tonight it does nothing to calm him. On the marble table rests an ivory envelope, heavy with embossed letters, an invitation he has no reason to keep reading but cannot put down. The wedding of Victoria Hale, the woman who once wore his ring, scheduled for a Saturday morning at a historic estate just outside town. Alex exhales slowly, jaw tight, not because he still loves her, but because the invitation feels like a verdict, a reminder of who she chose to become and who she decided he was not worth waiting for. He folds the card once, then again, his thoughts sharp and practical, the way they always are when emotions threaten to surface, and that is when he hears the soft sound of footsteps behind him, careful, respectful, almost invisible. Clara Bennett pauses near the doorway, holding a folded jacket over one arm, her posture straight but unassuming, eyes lowered in the way that comes from years of being told not to take up space. She has worked in this house long enough to know when silence is preferred, yet something in Alex's stillness makes her hesitate. He turns, meeting her gaze, and for a moment the room feels smaller, charged with words neither of them planned to say. Clara sets the jacket down, asks quietly if there is anything else he needs before she finishes for the night, and it is then that Alex does something entirely out of character. He studies her, not as part of the background of his life, not as the maid who keeps order while he conquers boardrooms, but as a person with her own gravity, her own calm strength. An idea forms, cold and precise, a solution that makes sense in his world where appearances carry weight and silence can be a weapon. He gestures to the chair across from him and asks her to sit, his voice measured, professional, as if discussing business. Clara does, confused, hands folded in her lap, heart beating just a little faster. He tells her about the wedding, about the expectations, about how people will look for him there. And then he makes the offer, plain and startling, asking her to attend as his date, just for one day, no emotions involved, no lines crossed, a simple arrangement with clear boundaries. Clara listens without interrupting, surprise flickering across her face, not because she misunderstands the words, but because she understands exactly what they imply about class, about judgment, about how the room will see her before they ever hear her speak. Alex assumes she will refuse, or accept quietly for practical reasons, but instead she lifts her eyes, steady and composed, and asks one careful question about the rules, about what he expects of her. And in that instant Alex realizes he may have underestimated the woman standing in front of him, a realization that will soon follow him into a crowded wedding hall where nothing goes according to plan. Clara does not answer Alex right away, not because she is unsure of what he asked, but because she understands the weight of it far better than he expects. She returns to her small room at the back of the penthouse that night, the kind of room most guests would never notice existed, and sits on the edge of the narrow bed with her hands resting on her knees, replaying his words in her mind. Just one day he had said, clear boundaries, no emotions. Yet Clara knows that rooms full of wealthy strangers are never neutral places, especially for someone like her. She has seen how people look at her uniform, how quickly kindness disappears when they believe you are invisible, and the thought of standing beside Alex Whitmore in a room filled with polished smiles and old money makes her chest tighten. Still, there is another thought she cannot ignore, quieter but stronger. Her mother's medical bills sit unpaid on the kitchen table of a small apartment miles away, the numbers written in black ink that does not fade. Just because you wish it would. The hours Clara works barely cover rent, groceries, and gas, and there is no safety net waiting if something goes wrong. Pride has always been her armor, but pride does not keep the lights on. The next morning, she moves through the penthouse with the same calm efficiency as always, preparing breakfast, straightening cushions, keeping her eyes down, yet Alex notices the difference in her silence. When she finally speaks, her voice is steady, asking practical questions instead of emotional ones. What time will they leave? What will she be expected to say? Whether she should speak at all unless spoken to. Alex answers as if finalizing a business deal, assuring her that no one will question her if she follows his lead, that this is simply about appearance, about showing the world that he has moved on. Clara nods, but inside she makes a decision that has nothing to do with appearances. If she is going to step into that room, she will do so with dignity, not as a prop, not as a costume he can put on and take off. She agrees, but only after setting her own terms, asking for honesty and respect, asking that he not introduce her as anything less than his companion. Alex pauses at that, surprised, then agrees, not fully understanding why the request unsettles him. Over the next few days, subtle changes unfold. A dress arrives, simple and elegant, not flashy, chosen with restraint rather than excess. Clara practices walking in heels she is not used to, measuring each step, reminding herself that balance is not about the shoes, but about confidence. She watches the news in the evenings, learning how people like Victoria Hale move through the world, how they speak in careful tones that hide sharper intentions beneath. Alex observes her from a distance, realizing that Clara is not transforming into someone else, but revealing someone he never bothered to see. The night before the wedding, Clara stands in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of the dress with trembling fingers, whispering a promise to herself that no matter how the crowd reacts, she will not shrink. This is not about revenge, not about proving a point, but about standing tall in a space that was never designed for her. As dawn approaches, she steps into the waiting car beside Alex, the city stretching awake around them, both of them unaware that the choice they made out of convenience and necessity is about to test everything they believe about power, worth, and who truly belongs at the center of the room. The car moves smoothly along the tree-lined road leading out of the city, tires humming softly against the pavement as morning sunlight filters through tall oaks and manicured hedges, and Clara keeps her hands folded neatly in her lap, focusing on her breathing the way she always does when nerves threaten to rise. Alex sits beside her, posture relaxed, eyes forward, yet his thoughts are anything but calm. He tells himself this is simple, that once they arrive he will play his role, exchange polite greetings, endure a few hours of forced smiles, and leave with his dignity intact. But the quiet presence of Clara beside him complicates that certainty. She does not fidget, does not ask for reassurance, and that composure unsettles him more than panic ever would. As they approach the estate, the driveway curves wide, lined with white flowers and carefully placed lanterns, everything arranged to project perfection, and Clara notices how the staff move with rehearsed precision, greeting guests by name, guiding them toward the ceremony lawn. This is a world she understands in a different way, not as a guest, but as someone who knows what it takes to keep such illusions intact. When the car stops, Alex steps out first, offering his arm, a gesture that feels formal but sincere, and Clara accepts, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve, steady, intentional. The moment they appear together, conversations nearby soften, then pause, eyes flicking toward them with open curiosity that quickly sharpens into judgment. Clara feels it immediately, the familiar sensation of being measured and dismissed before she ever speaks, yet she lifts her chin, reminding herself that she is here by choice, not permission. Inside the reception hall, the air carries the faint scent of fresh flowers and polished wood, and every surface reflects light, designed to flatter faces that already expect admiration. Alex introduces Clara simply, using her name without explanation, and she notes how some smiles tighten at that, as if people are waiting for a detail he refuses to provide. Victoria Hale appears near the center of the room, radiant in a way that feels practiced rather than joyful, and when her gaze lands on Alex, a flicker of surprise crosses her face, quickly masked by a polite smile. She approaches, greeting him with controlled warmth, then turns to Clara, her eyes briefly scanning the dress, the posture, the calm confidence that does not fit the story she had already written in her mind. Clara meets her gaze without challenge or apology, offering a courteous greeting that leaves no opening for condescension. The exchange lasts only seconds, but something shifts, subtle and unmistakable, as Victoria realizes this woman cannot be dismissed as easily as expected. Throughout the ceremony preparations, small tests follow, disguised as casual remarks, questions about how Clara and Alex met, comments about taste and tradition, all delivered with a light tone that expects compliance. Clara answers each one carefully, honestly, without revealing more than necessary, and Alex begins to notice how effortlessly she navigates conversations that once intimidated him, her strength not loud but unyielding. Guests begin to whisper less about why she is there and more about who she is, and that change ripples outward, quiet but powerful. As the music swells and the ceremony draws near, Clara stands beside Alex, fully aware that this is only the beginning, that the true test will come when all eyes are finally on her, and she prepares herself not to impress, but to remain exactly who she is in a room determined to define her otherwise. As the ceremony concludes and guests drift toward the reception, the atmosphere shifts from polite formality to something sharper, more observant, and Clara senses it immediately as she steps into the grand hall beside Alex. Crystal glasses catch the light, servers glide across the floor with practiced ease, and the low hum of conversation rises and falls like a tide, carrying names, fortunes, and unspoken hierarchies. Clara moves with quiet awareness, noting exits, reading faces, understanding instinctively how spaces like this function, because she has spent years working just outside them, watching how confidence is performed and how respect is rationed. Alex remains close, yet she notices how his posture changes, how he relaxes without realizing it, trusting her presence in a way he did not plan to. At their table, conversations circle around investments, summer homes, and old connections, subtle tests disguised as small talk. And when Clara is asked what she does, she answers simply, honestly, without apology or embellishment. Some guests blink at her words, surprised by the absence of embarrassment they expect, while others lean in, curious despite themselves. Alex listens, struck by how her authenticity commands attention more effectively than his wealth ever could. Across the room, Victoria watches, her smile fixed, eyes sharp, recalibrating, as she begins to understand that Clara is not overwhelmed, not eager to impress, and certainly not intimidated. During dinner, a minor disruption occurs when a misplaced seating arrangement causes confusion among guests, murmurs spreading as staff scramble to correct it, and before Alex can intervene, Clara rises calmly, speaking to the coordinator with quiet authority, offering a solution that restores order without spectacle. The moment passes quickly, but those nearby notice, and respect shifts subtly in her direction. Alex feels it too, an unfamiliar warmth of admiration mixed with something deeper, something he does not yet name. As the evening progresses, Clara navigates the room with measured grace, engaging when invited, withdrawing when necessary, never overstepping, never shrinking, and each interaction chips away at the assumptions people carried when she first arrived. She is not performing a role. She is simply being herself, and that steadiness unsettles a room accustomed to masks. Alex reflects on the days leading up to this moment, the quiet preparations, the simple dress chosen for comfort and confidence rather than extravagance, the conversations where Clara asked thoughtful questions instead of seeking approval, and he realizes that this was never a transformation but a revelation. When the first toast is announced, glasses lifted, anticipation rippling through the crowd, Clara feels the weight of the room settle briefly on her shoulders, not with fear, but with clarity. She knows this night will define how she is remembered here, not because of where she stands, but because of how she carries herself. Alex watches her as the speeches begin, understanding at last that bringing Clara here was not a calculated move, but a catalyst, one that has begun to expose truths he has long avoided about status, worth, and the quiet power of someone who refuses to be diminished. And as applause fills the hall, he senses that the most important moment of the evening has not yet arrived, but when it does, Clara will meet it on her own terms. The room grows quieter as the master of ceremonies announces an open moment for shared remarks, a tradition meant for heartfelt words and polished gratitude, and Clara feels the attention shift again, this time heavier, more deliberate. Alex senses it too, his instinct telling him to shield her, to step in, but Clara places a gentle hand on his arm, a silent request for trust, and rises from her seat with calm resolve. Murmurs ripple across the tables, curiosity sharpening as people recognize that this is not part of the plan they anticipated. Yet Clara does not rush or hesitate, moving to the microphone with measured steps that echo softly across the floor. She takes a breath, allowing the room to settle, her voice steady as she begins by congratulating the couple, her words sincere, free of bitterness, acknowledging the effort it takes to build a future and the courage it takes to choose one. The simplicity of her tone disarms the crowd, and as she continues, she speaks not of status or spectacle, but of service, of the unseen hands that make nights like this possible, the planners, the staff, the people who work long hours so others can celebrate without worry. Heads turn, some uncomfortable, others thoughtful, as Clara gently reframes the evening, reminding everyone that grace is not measured by wealth, but by how people treat those they believe can offer them nothing in return. Alex watches, stunned, realizing that she is not defending herself or seeking approval, but offering perspective, a quiet correction to a room accustomed to flattery. Clara closes by wishing the couple peace and partnership, then thanks the guests for listening, stepping back without waiting for applause, though it comes anyway, tentative at first, then growing as understanding spreads. Victoria's smile falters, not from anger, but from the recognition that the moment she hoped would elevate her has been transformed into something she cannot control. Conversations resume, but their tone has shifted, softer, more reflective, and several guests approach Clara afterward, not with patronizing praise, but with genuine curiosity, asking about her experiences, her insights, treating her as an equal for the first time that evening. Alex feels a tightening in his chest, a realization settling in that this was never about proving anything to his past, but about confronting his own assumptions. He thanks Clara quietly, but she shakes her head, reminding him that she did not do this for him, or for anyone else, but because it felt right. As the evening winds down and the couple prepares to depart, Alex and Clara step outside into the cool night air, the estate lights glowing behind them like a distant memory. Alex finally speaks, admitting that he invited her as a shield, a statement, a way to control a narrative, and that watching her tonight showed him how limited that thinking was. Clara listens, not interrupting, then responds with gentle honesty, explaining that dignity does not come from proximity to power, but from consistency of character. They stand there for a moment, the noise of the celebration fading, both aware that something fundamental has shifted, that the agreement they made can no longer contain what has grown between them. And as they walk toward the waiting car, Alex understands that the most significant change of the night did not happen inside the hall, but in the quiet space where truth finally had room to breathe. The drive back to the city is quieter than the one that brought them there, the road stretching ahead in long silver lines as the estate fades behind them, and Clara watches the reflection of passing lights slide across the window, feeling the weight of the evening settle into something more personal. Alex breaks the silence once, asking if she is comfortable, his tone careful, stripped of its usual confidence, and she answers honestly that she is tired but clear-headed, aware that something has changed in a way neither of them can undo. When they arrive at the penthouse, the space feels different, not grand or impressive, but strangely exposed, as if the walls have listened to everything left unsaid. Clara removes her shoes near the door, grounding herself in the familiar ritual, while Alex lingers by the window, hands in his pockets, struggling to reconcile the image he brought with him to the wedding with the woman standing calmly in his living room. He thanks her again, this time without formality, acknowledging that what she did could not have been planned or purchased, and Clara responds with measured honesty, explaining that she agreed to go because she needed the money, but stayed true to herself because she needed to look in the mirror afterward without regret. Her words land softly but decisively, and Alex realizes how rarely he hears truth delivered without fear or expectation. The following morning unfolds with an awkward gentleness. Neither of them expected, breakfast prepared without the usual distance, conversation tentative but sincere, both aware that the agreement they made has reached its natural end. Alex offers to finalize payment, framing it as a conclusion, but Clara stops him, her voice calm as she clarifies that while she will accept what was promised, she will not allow last night to be reduced to a transaction. She explains that dignity is not something she lends or leases, and that stepping into that room was her choice, not a favor she owes. Alex listens, humbled, understanding that this boundary is not rejection but self-respect, and it challenges him more than any confrontation ever has. As the day progresses, messages begin to arrive on his phone, subtle inquiries from guests, comments about Clara's speech, questions about her role in his life, and for the first time he does not rush to manage the narrative. Instead, he considers what it would mean to answer honestly, not with labels or defenses, but with clarity. Clara spends the afternoon packing a small bag, preparing to return to her routine, the certainty of her world providing comfort, yet she pauses occasionally, reflecting on how easily she commanded a room that was never meant to welcome her, and how that strength came from within rather than circumstance. When Alex finally speaks again, he admits that inviting her was the most calculated decision he made that night, and watching her transform it into something meaningful revealed how often he hides behind control. He asks, not as an employer or benefactor, but as a man reassessing his values, whether she would consider staying in his life beyond the boundaries they set, without contracts or expectations. Clara considers his words carefully, weighing sincerity against habit, then responds that connection cannot be rushed or owned, but if it grows, it must do so on equal ground. Her answer is not a promise, but an opening, and Alex feels the unfamiliar pull of patience, realizing that for the first time in years, he is willing to wait, to learn, and to meet someone where they stand rather than where he believes they should be. The days following the wedding unfold with a quiet intensity neither of them expected, and Clara returns to her routine with a heightened awareness of how quickly moments of clarity can fade when reality presses back in. She resumes her work with the same discipline as before, yet something inside her has shifted, a steadiness born from knowing she stood her ground in a place designed to diminish her. Alex, meanwhile, finds himself confronted by consequences he did not anticipate, not in the form of anger, but scrutiny. Invitations arrive less frequently, replaced by carefully worded messages asking about Clara, about her background, about what exactly she represents in his life, and for the first time he feels defensive not of his image, but of her dignity. Victoria Hale enters this space with calculated precision, reaching out under the guise of closure, requesting a private conversation to clear the air. Alex agrees, believing honesty will be enough, yet when they meet, he recognizes the familiar pattern of subtle manipulation, the questions framed as concern, the implications masked as advice. Victoria suggests that Clara enjoyed the attention a little too much, that her speech was an attempt to claim relevance in a world she does not belong to, and while Alex challenges her openly, the seed of doubt lingers longer than he wants to admit. Clara feels the impact indirectly, noticing Alex grow quieter, more guarded, as if weighing words before offering them, and she recognizes the warning signs from years of observing power dynamics from the sidelines. When Victoria appears unexpectedly at the penthouse one afternoon, asking to speak with Clara directly, the encounter is polite but charged, Victoria offering compliments that barely conceal judgment, suggesting that moments like the wedding can be confusing for people unaccustomed to attention. Clara listens without interruption, then responds with calm certainty, explaining that attention is fleeting, but self-respect is not, and that she did not speak to impress, but to be honest. The exchange ends without raised voices, yet the tension lingers, and Clara realizes that the greatest challenge ahead is not public perception, but whether Alex can fully separate his past from the values he claims to embrace. That evening, Alex confronts his own uncertainty, acknowledging to Clara that while he believes in what she stands for, he is still unlearning years of conditioning that equated worth with approval. Clara receives this confession not as an apology owed to her, but as a truth he owes himself, and she gently reminds him that growth requires discomfort, not reassurance. She makes it clear that she will not remain in any space where her presence must be defended rather than respected, and if he is not ready to meet her openly, she will step back without resentment. The weight of that possibility forces Alex to examine his choices with brutal clarity, understanding that this is the moment where intentions become actions. As night falls, messages circulate, whispers of tension between old and new, and Alex decides to speak publicly, not with grand declarations, but with consistent behavior, declining events that frame Clara as a curiosity and setting boundaries that reflect his evolving priorities. Clara watches from a distance, not expecting perfection, but seeking sincerity, aware that trust is built not in gestures, but in persistence. The path forward is uncertain, layered with resistance and misunderstanding. Yet both understand that the test before them is no longer about fitting into a room, but about choosing the values that define the life they are willing to build. Time becomes the quiet ally neither of them expected, and over the following weeks Alex begins to do something unfamiliar. He simplifies. Meetings are declined without elaborate excuses. Invitations are answered with clarity rather than calculation, and when asked about Clara, he speaks plainly, not elevating her with titles or diminishing her with explanations, simply acknowledging her as the woman he is getting to know. This consistency ripples outward, confusing some, alienating others, but it steadies him in a way success never did. Clara notices the change not through announcements, but through patterns, through how he shows up when it matters, how he listens without interrupting, how he respects her work schedule and her boundaries without making a performance of restraint. They meet in ordinary places now, a neighborhood cafe where the chairs do not match and the barista knows Clara by name. Quiet walks through a public garden where no one cares who Alex is, conversations that stretch without urgency. In these moments, Clara feels the ground level out beneath her feet, and Alex feels the relief of not having to stand above anyone. The turning point comes quietly, without an audience, when Alex invites Clara to an event he once would have considered essential, a philanthropic dinner meant to showcase generosity and influence. He tells her he will attend whether she joins him or not, and that the choice is entirely hers, not a test, not a statement, simply an invitation. Clara considers it carefully, recognizing the difference between being brought into a room and choosing to enter it, and she agrees, not because she feels obligated, but because she feels respected. At the event, Alex introduces her without hesitation, not waiting for reactions, not adjusting his tone, and when subtle comments arise, he addresses them directly, calmly, reinforcing that clarity is not confrontation. Clara watches this with measured trust, aware that this is the action she needed to see, the follow-through that transforms words into truth. Later that night, away from the noise, Alex acknowledges the fear he carried, the fear of losing status, of being misunderstood, and admits that choosing differently has cost him certain advantages he once valued. Clara responds with gentle honesty, explaining that every choice carries a cost, but only some build a life worth standing in. She tells him she will not be anyone's exception, but she is willing to be someone's partner if the ground remains equal. Alex absorbs this, understanding that the gesture she needs is not grand, but enduring. In the days that follow, he makes a public decision that surprises many, restructuring aspects of his company culture to elevate unseen contributors, crediting teams rather than individuals, redirecting attention from spectacle to substance, not as a tribute to Clara, but as alignment with the values she awakened. Clara observes from her own vantage point, not rushing to celebrate, but recognizing the quiet integrity of sustained change. When Alex finally asks her, not for assurance, but for time to continue growing together, Clara agrees, not because she is convinced, but because she is hopeful, and in that mutual patience, they find something neither expected, a partnership built not on defiance or approval, but on the steady choice to stand side by side without needing to prove they belong. The months that follow do not unfold with spectacle, but with intention, and Clara and Alex build something quieter and stronger than either imagined, shaped by routine rather than resistance. Clara no longer works in the penthouse, having chosen her own path with clarity and independence, yet she and Alex meet often, sharing meals cooked without staff, conversations that stretch late into the evening, and plans that account for both ambition and rest. Alex learns to listen not as a strategist, but as a partner, absorbing Clara's perspective on work, care, and balance, while Clara learns to trust consistency over reassurance, watching how his choices align with his words over time. The turning point comes on an ordinary afternoon when Alex invites Clara to a small gathering at a community center he helped fund, not as a guest of honor, but as one of many contributors, and she watches him blend into the room, without command or control, present without pretense. When someone asks how they met, Alex answers simply, without embellishment or defense, acknowledging that it began with a mistake and grew through honesty, and Clara recognizes the ease with which he now tells the truth. Later, as they walk through the city at dusk, Alex stops near a quiet overlook, the skyline stretching before them, and speaks with careful sincerity, explaining that the life he once built was impressive but incomplete, and that meeting her revealed not what he lacked materially, but what he had neglected emotionally. He does not make promises framed as guarantees, but offers commitment framed as effort, acknowledging that partnership is not a role to perform but a practice to uphold. Clara listens, weighing his words against the man he has become, and responds with gentle certainty, expressing that love, to her, is not about rescue or elevation, but about mutual respect and shared responsibility. When Alex asks her to build a future together, he does so without kneeling theatrics or public declarations, simply standing beside her, hand extended, inviting rather than persuading. Clara accepts, not because the moment is perfect, but because it is honest, and they move forward with a shared understanding that what they choose each day matters more than how it appears. Their commitment is marked not by grand ceremonies, but by decisions that reflect their values, choosing time over spectacle, integrity over approval, and connection over control. When they do eventually celebrate, it is in a small setting, surrounded by people who know them as individuals rather than symbols, and Clara stands with quiet confidence, no longer needing to prove her place, while Alex stands grounded, having learned that leadership begins with humility. Looking back, the night that once defined them becomes simply a beginning, a reminder that dignity cannot be borrowed and love cannot be staged. And as they step into their life together, they do so not as a millionaire and a maid, not as a statement or a rebellion, but as two people who chose to see one another clearly and walk forward on equal ground.